All right, good evening. My name is Mike Banner, and here in History 325, I'm going to be giving you an overview of my paper presentation, and look forward to just talking through a few things. So, kind of the outline what I have prepared for this evening is first, I'll talk to you about my sources and just share with you kind of some background on why I picked those four and the meaning of each one of those sources. So I look forward to getting into that. And then two is the direction of the paper that I plan on writing. And then three, just a brief synopsis of just the overall legacy of American immigration. So, all right, why don't we go ahead and get started and walk you through my four sources. So, first off, it's actually a letter from an actual immigrant that came over from Ireland, and this was in the year 1818. And what's cool about this, the name of the gentleman, his name is John Doyle, and he writes about specifically what the first 6 months were once he arrived into the United States after leaving Ireland. So I think what's interesting to me is if you can imagine, especially back at this time frame, which is the early 1800s, as far as what life was like and what they had at their disposal as far as communication and transportation. If you were to hop in a boat and travel across the Atlantic Sea to a place that you've never been before, I'm sure it would probably be a little bit hectic or nervous or scary. So he just really paints a great picture through his personal experiences of what his journey was like getting into the United States. When he first got there, he had a lot of difficulties, and in his letter, he addresses these difficulties. But John certainly was not alone, as far as immigrants coming over that struggled in the beginning, either finding work or places to live, and stuff like that. So, secondly, the next one is it goes into the early 1940s. The African American slaves is what the second one is, and this is from Frederick Douglass, and this is similar to it's called Teaching American History, and this was an actual journal writing about the discrimination and the abuse that the African American slaves went through. And it was similar to John Doyle. What was great is hearing Frederick directly in his words about what some of these slaves went through, and really tough to kind of read and understand at that point in America, how people could treat other individually so poorly. And obviously the African American slaves had such a different experience than everyone else coming in the immigration. They were one of the few that weren't able to actually choose to come into America, but was forced to on really rough conditions. Third, which was probably my favorite one, I had a chance to interview my grandpa. His name is Charles Stanger. He's up in Boise, Idaho. But it was a great conversation I was able to have with him because he's very passionate about our ancestry or family history, or just really looking at our family tree, I guess is a better way to put it. But there's one in particular that was really neat that he shared with me. And one of our great relatives lived in Liverpool, England, and they came over in what the boat called Zealand. And this was in 1849, but it was really cool. He's able to share with me some of her stories, and it's kind of neat just hearing it directly from a family member, which was pretty cool. But she went from England, Liverpool, England, into Massachusetts, and was there for a few years, and then migrated west all the way into Colorado, and then eventually settling in Utah. But it was just kind of neat to hear his stories. And then my last source is I was actually pretty excited to stumble upon this. This is actually the United States Congress House Committee on Immigration, and specifically it was on what were the conditions of Ellis Island. So this was hearings before the United States House in Washington, and this was in 1919. So this is an actual session that took place, and everything was documented as far as the conversations. But it was just really neat to hear directly from the workers of Ellis Island, what those conditions were like, and they spoke specifically on how we were handling immigration. Was it fair? Was it consistent? And they wanted to see what the actual process was once someone arrived at Ellis. So the guy that they actually interviewed, his name was Brian Wool. He has worked there for 27 years, so definitely a reliable source. But one of the kind of the neat things was, or not neat, but in his recommendation, they were never to exceed 1,500 people a night at Ellis Island. So it was a great read, very insightful too. So secondly, the direction of my paper, I'm kind of taking the professor's lead as far as recommendation he made. I plan on making the argument that the U.S. is a nation of immigrants, and I think the reason why I want to tackle this is just in some way or another, we're all immigrants to America, and it just has really hit home with me. Now, everyone has had a different situation as far as getting here or not being able to get here. If you look at Lee, who just wrote the book on the American Gate and the whole Chinese exclusion, obviously their process into America was a lot more difficult and a lot more harsh, and some of them weren't even able to make it. But there's just so many neat stories of immigrants coming to America and being successful and being able to find work and being able to improve their quality of life. So that's going to be my main argument, is the U.S. is a nation of immigrants, since we all are. And then lastly, the legacy of immigration. I would just say, even to today, you hear just so many great stories of immigrants coming over to America and being successful. And I think at the end of the day, people are unsatisfied, or they just live in some really bad conditions that we're not used to. And so for them able to come into America and have that American dream and have that right to have a better life, I think is a legacy. And to this day, there are people still dying to try to get into America because the quality of life is that much higher. But our historical immigration wasn't perfect, how we handled everything, but I still think it's a great place to live, and that's why people are still trying to come here.